They did not choose me as a bride. They chose me as an insult. I understood that the moment the wedding dress would not close. The zipper stopped halfway up my back with a soft, stubborn sound, and the woman behind me sighed like my body had personally offended her. The bridal room inside the Callahan estate smelled of white roses, hairspray, and money so old it seemed built into the walls. Everything was pale and perfect. The silk curtains, the polished vanity, the crystal lamps throwing warm light across my face. Even the dress was perfect, if perfection meant a beautiful thing designed to make me feel wrong inside it. I stood in front of the mirror, 27 years old, 5 feet 5 inches tall, white skin flushed from embarrassment, soft arms held stiff at my sides, brown hair pinned under a veil I had not chosen. The gown pressed too tightly at my waist and pulled across my chest every time I breathed. I looked like a woman being wrapped as a gift for someone who had already been told to be disappointed. "Do not move," the stylist said, tugging again. "You are making it harder." I bit the inside of my cheek. I wanted to tell her I had not asked for this dress. I had not asked for this room. I had not asked to marry Vincent Callahan, the most feared man in Boston, inside a mansion guarded by men who spoke into their sleeves and never smiled. But some truths were too large to say when your mother was crying quietly in another room, your father was pretending his hands were not shaking, and your family restaurant's debt had somehow become a marriage contract written by men who never washed a dish in their lives. The stylist gave one final pull. The zipper moved another inch, then held. "Good enough," she muttered. "Good enough." Those two words sat on my skin heavier than the dress. I stared at my reflection and tried to recognize Hannah Brooks, the woman who balanced receipts at Brooks' family kitchen every night after closing, who knew which customers tipped in quarters, who could stretch a pot of soup through a slow week, who laughed too loudly when nervous, and always carried peppermint gum in her purse. That woman wore aprons and worn sneakers. That woman smelled like coffee and warm bread. That woman did not belong beneath a cathedral veil in a Mafia family's private ballroom, while strangers waited to see if a powerful man would reject her in public. Outside the door, voices drifted down the hallway. Soft at first, then clearer. They really made Vincent marry her? A woman laughed, low and polished. "Richard is crueler than I thought." Another voice answered, "She is not even close to Cassandra." Poor Vincent. My fingers tightened around the edge of the veil until the delicate fabric wrinkled in my fist. Cassandra Vale. I had seen her once in a society magazine at the restaurant, blonde, elegant, thin as a champagne flute, smiling beside Vincent at some charity dinner years ago. The kind of woman people expected next to a man like him. The kind of woman who turned every room into a mirror that reflected her correctly. I wondered if she was outside now, waiting to watch me walk in like a punchline wearing white. My mother entered without knocking. Her blue dress was simple, the same one she had worn to my cousin's courthouse wedding, but she had pressed it until it looked new. Her eyes found mine in the mirror, and the apology in them nearly broke me. "Hannah," she whispered. I turned before she could cry. "Please do not." She covered her mouth with one hand. "I am sorry. Your father thought there would be more time. There is never more time when men like Richard Callahan decide they own the clock." I did not say that out loud. My father had borrowed money after the kitchen fire last winter. Not for gambling, not for luxury, for repairs, payroll, taxes, the broken freezer, the staff we could not bring ourselves to let go. Then the interest changed. The papers changed. The men collecting changed. And somehow our last chance became a wedding invitation printed on ivory cardstock with my name beside Vincent Callahan's like it had always belonged there. Mom stepped closer and touched my cheek with trembling fingers. "You do not have to smile." That was the kindest thing anyone had said to me all day. I laughed once, but it came out thin. "Good." I do not think my face remembers how. A knock struck the door, firm and formal. "Miss Brooks," a man said from the hallway. "They are ready for you." Ready. As if I were a cake being carried out. As if I were a document to sign. As if I were not a woman standing inside a dress chosen to shame a man I had never met. My mother reached for my hand, but I gently pulled away. If I held her, I would fall apart. I lifted my chin instead. The veil slipped over my shoulders. The dress pinched when I breathed. The whispers outside grew quiet, which somehow felt worse. I looked at myself one last time in the mirror and made a promise so small no one else could hear it. If they were going to make me walk into that room as an insult, then I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me bow my head. The hallway outside the bridal room was longer than it had any right to be. White marble stretched beneath my shoes, polished so brightly I could see the blurred shape of myself moving across it like a ghost in borrowed silk. Every step made the dress tighten at my waist, a quiet reminder that even the fabric had been selected to argue against me. The man sent to escort me walked 3 paces ahead, his black suit pressed, his posture straight, his expression professionally empty. My mother followed behind me, close enough that I could hear her breathing, far enough that she understood I needed to enter alone. At the end of the hallway, 2 massive doors stood open to the ballroom. Warm gold light spilled through them. Music drifted out, soft strings playing something elegant and cruel. Then came the sound beneath it. Whispering. Not loud. Never loud. People like the Callahans did not need volume to hurt someone. They used silk voices and champagne smiles. I stepped through the doors, and the room turned toward me. I had never been looked at by that many people at once. Not seen. Measured. Weighed. Compared. The private ballroom inside the Callahan estate looked like a museum built for a family that mistook wealth for religion. Tall windows, dark wood walls, white flowers in crystal vases, candles flickering along the aisle like little witnesses. Rows of guests sat beneath a ceiling painted with clouds and angels, though nothing about that room felt heavenly. Men in tailored suits watched from one side. Women in pale designer gowns watched from the other. Their eyes traveled over my dress, my arms, my waist, my face, then moved away with that quick, polished mercy rich people used when they wanted you to know you had failed without forcing them to say it. I kept my chin up. The veil trembled against my shoulders. My bouquet smelled too sweet. White roses and lilies pressed together so tightly their stems dug into my palm. At the front of the room stood Richard Callahan. I recognized him from the contract meeting at Brooks' family kitchen 2 nights earlier. Silver hair, expensive smile, eyes like a locked drawer. He wore a charcoal suit and held himself like the room belonged to him because, for now, it did. Beside him stood a priest, pale and uncomfortable, hands folded around a little black book. The priest looked at me once and then down at the floor. That told me everything. This was not sacred. It was paperwork wearing flowers. Then I saw Cassandra Vale. She sat in the front row like she had been placed there by a decorator. Blonde hair swept into a perfect twist, red dress smooth as poured wine, diamonds at her ears bright enough to look sharp. She crossed one thin leg over the other and smiled when our eyes met. Not a smile of greeting, a smile of confirmation. I had been imagined, judged, and dismissed by her long before I entered the room. The empty space beside the priest waited for Vincent Callahan. His absence had weight. Everyone felt it. People glanced at their watches, then at Richard, then at me. I realized suddenly that they had not only brought me here to humiliate Vincent. They had brought me here to see whether he would humiliate me first. That was the entertainment. Would the feared man of Boston refuse the soft-bodied daughter of a failing restaurant owner? Would he laugh? Would he walk out? Would he send me back down the aisle with flowers in my shaking hands while everyone pretended to pity me? Heat crawled up my neck. I fixed my eyes on a spot above Richard's shoulder and kept walking. Halfway down the aisle, a woman in the second row leaned toward her friend and whispered, "Poor girl. She must know." I almost stopped. Not because the words surprised me, but because they were the first that sounded almost kind, and pity cut differently than cruelty. Cruelty made me stiffen. Pity made me want to disappear. My father stood near the front on the left side, wearing his only black suit. It hung loose on him now. The kitchen fire, the debts, the sleepless nights had carved hollows into his cheeks. When he saw me, his eyes filled, and he looked away as if my white dress were an accusation. I wanted to be angry at him. Part of me was. But another part still remembered him teaching me how to count change at the register when I was 8, telling me numbers never lied if people did not force them to. Richard stepped forward as I reached the front. "Miss Brooks," he said smoothly, as if we were old friends. "You look lovely." The lie sat between us like a dead flower. "Thank you," I said, because my mother had raised me to be polite even when politeness felt like swallowing glass. His smile widened by a fraction. "Vincent is delayed. Family business." "Of course," Cassandra murmured from the front row, just loud enough. A bride worth arriving on time for might have solved that. A ripple moved through the closest guests. Not quite laughter. Worse. Permission. My fingers tightened around the bouquet until one thorn bit through the ribbon and pressed into my skin. I did not flinch. Richard looked at Cassandra with mild disapproval that fooled no one, then turned back to me. We will begin when he arrives. I stood beside the empty place meant for my future husband, facing a room full of people who had already written my shame into the evening. The candles flickered. The music stopped. Silence spread from row to row. Then, somewhere beyond the ballroom doors, footsteps sounded against the marble floor. Slow, certain, unhurried. Every head turned before mine did. Richard's smile sharpened. Cassandra sat taller. My heart beat once, hard and painful. Vincent Callahan had arrived. The first thing I noticed about Vincent Callahan was not that he was handsome, though he was in the distant, dangerous way winter is beautiful from behind glass. It was not the black suit tailored so precisely it seemed to have been built around his silence. It was not his height, well over 6 feet, or the white skin drawn tight over a face that gave away nothing. It was the way the room changed when he entered. No one announced him. No one needed to. The air recognized him before anyone spoke. Conversations died. Shoulders straightened. Richard's smile became careful. Cassandra's mouth softened into something she must have practiced in mirrors, something meant to look like longing and victory at the same time. I stood at the front of the ballroom in a wedding dress that pinched with every breath and watched the most feared man in Boston walk toward me like time had decided to slow down for him personally. His dark hair was combed back, not perfectly, just enough to look untouched by the chaos waiting for him. His eyes were blue-gray, cold at first glance, but not empty. Never empty. They moved across the room once, taking in the guests, the flowers, the priest, his uncle, Cassandra, my parents, the contract folder resting on a side table, and finally me. I prepared myself for the look, the quick disappointment, the insult dressed as silence, the flicker of anger that would tell the room I was exactly what they meant me to be. A punishment, a joke, a public bruise on his pride. But when Vincent looked at me, his expression did not twist. He did not lower his gaze to judge the dress. He did not look over my body like it was evidence against me. He looked at my face, directly, quietly, as if I were the only person in the room not performing for him. That was the first thing that frightened them. Richard stepped forward, cheerful as a man lighting a candle in a room full of gasoline. Vincent, there you are? We were beginning to worry. Vincent did not look at him. He kept his eyes on me. Miss Brooks, he said. His voice was low, controlled, and smoother than I expected. Not soft. Softness could be faked. This was restraint. I forced myself to answer. Mr. Callahan. My voice sounded smaller than his, but it did not break. His gaze moved to the bouquet clenched in my hands. The ribbon had slipped slightly, and the tiny thorn pressing through it had left a red mark on my palm. He noticed. Of course he did. Something cold passed behind his eyes, then vanished before anyone else could name it. Richard cleared his throat. The family is assembled. The agreement is clear. We should proceed. Vincent finally turned his head toward him. Agreement? Richard's smile held. The marriage agreement. Your father's bylaws, the Brooks debt settlement, the consolidation clause. We discussed this. We will not insult our guests by delaying any longer. A few people shifted in their seats. The priest stared at his book. Cassandra watched Vincent with bright expectation, as if this was the moment he would finally refuse me and restore the order she believed in. Vincent glanced at the priest, then at my father, then back to me. His next question was not loud, but it struck the room harder than any raised voice could have. Did anyone ask if you wanted this? I forgot how to breathe. Not because the question was complicated, because no one had asked it. Not Richard, not the lawyers, not my father, though shame had made him gentle. Not even my mother, because fear had taught all of us to discuss survival instead of desire. The ballroom froze around me. I heard the candles crackle. I heard Cassandra inhale. I heard my own heartbeat under the too tight bodice of the dress. Richard laughed once, lightly. Vincent, do not be theatrical. Miss Brooks understands the necessity of the arrangement. Vincent's eyes did not leave mine. That was not my question. My lips parted. I should have said yes to protect my parents. I should have said yes, because the debt still hung over us like a ceiling about to fall. I should have played my role, smiled, and let the paperwork become a life. Instead, my fingers tightened around the bouquet, and honesty slipped out before obedience could stop it. No, the word was barely above a whisper. but the room heard it. I knew because Richard stopped smiling. Vincent turned then, fully, toward his uncle. "Then this is not a wedding," he said. "This is an ambush." A sound moved through the guests, half shock, half panic. Cassandra stood so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. Richard's face hardened, the mask thinning. "Careful, nephew." Vincent took one slow step toward him, not threatening, not dramatic, simply present in a way that made everyone remember where they were and whose name was carved into the stone gates outside. "I have been careful my entire life," he said. "That is why I recognize a trap when you decorate it with roses." My father covered his face with one shaking hand. My mother whispered my name. I stood there unable to move, still holding the flowers, still wearing the dress they had chosen to shame me, and watched Vincent Callahan dismantle the room with nothing but questions. Richard lowered his voice. "You cannot walk away without consequences." Vincent looked back at me then, and for the first time, I saw something beneath the coldness. Not pity, not attraction. Choice. The one thing no one had given me all day. "Miss Brooks," he said, "if you wish to leave, you will leave safely. Your family will not be touched by this room's disappointment. The debt will be reviewed by my own attorney, not my uncle's. And if you wish to stay, it will be under conditions you name out loud, in front of everyone." My breath shook. Every eye was on me again, but the weight had changed. Before, they had watched to see whether I would be rejected. Now they watched to see whether I would decide. Cassandra's face had gone pale with disbelief. Richard looked at me as if I had become dangerous by being offered a voice. I looked down at the bouquet in my hands. White roses. Perfect. Suffocating. I set them carefully on the table beside the contract folder. Then I lifted my chin and looked at Vincent Callahan, the man they had tried to punish with me. "If I stay," I said, "no one in this house gets to call me your punishment." The room went silent. Vincent's answer came without hesitation. "Agreed." Agreed. One word, spoken in front of candles, lawyers, rivals, relatives, and every polished mouth that had whispered my humiliation into the air. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt the room inhale against me. Power did not like being corrected, and rich families liked it even less when the correction came from a woman in a dress they had chosen to make uncomfortable. Richard Callahan looked from Vincent to me, and something in his eyes sharpened. Not surprise anymore. Calculation. Cassandra gave a short laugh, too delicate to sound ugly unless you were close enough to hear the crack in it. "How noble," she said. "The bride has demands now." Vincent turned his head toward her. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Miss Vale," he said, "if you cannot remain respectful, you may leave before the vows begin." Her face went still. Several guests looked down at their programs as if the printed paper had suddenly become fascinating. Cassandra sat back slowly, color rising beneath her perfect makeup. I should have enjoyed it. A small part of me did. The smaller, wounded part. The part that had heard her laughter before I even walked into the ballroom. But the larger part of me knew humiliation did not become justice simply because it changed direction. I looked at Vincent. "That is one condition," I said. His eyes returned to mine immediately. I had the strange sense that if the ceiling had collapsed, he still would have waited for me to finish. "I do not want anyone insulted because of me. Not Cassandra. Not your family. Not my parents." I heard my mother make a soft sound behind me. Richard smiled faintly, as if he had found a crack. "How generous." Vincent ignored him. "That is your first condition?" "Yes." My voice grew steadier because every word made the floor feel more solid beneath my feet. "If this happens, it happens without cruelty being called tradition." A silence followed. Not empty silence. Listening silence. Vincent nodded once. "Agreed. My second condition is separate rooms." A ripple moved through the guests, quick and scandalized, as though I had said something improper instead of something necessary. Heat burned across my face, but I did not look away. This is a legal arrangement until it becomes something else by choice. No locked doors. No assumptions. No pretending vows erase consent. The priest coughed into his fist. Cassandra looked at the ceiling. Richard's jaw tightened. Vincent's expression did not change except for his eyes. They softened by one shade, almost too little to notice. "Agreed," he said again. No hesitation. That mattered. It should not have. But it did. I swallowed. Third condition. My family restaurant is not collateral anymore. Brooks' family kitchen comes out of this untouched. The debt is reviewed. Any unfair interest or hidden fee is removed by someone who does not answer to Richard Callahan. My father looked up then, his face pale with shame and hope fighting in the same tired lines. Richard stepped forward. That is not how this works. Vincent finally looked at him fully. It is now. Uncle and nephew held each other's gaze, and the room seemed to shrink around them. I understood, suddenly, that this family spoke in layers. Every word was a hallway. Every silence was a locked room. I did not know their rules, which made me either helpless or dangerous. I decided I preferred dangerous. I lifted my chin. Fourth condition. I keep my name. Brooks. Not because I reject yours, but because I refuse to disappear inside it. A faint sound moved through the guests again. This time, I did not care. Vincent looked at me for a long moment, and something almost like respect crossed his face. Hannah Brooks, he said, carefully, as if testing the weight of it. Agreed. Hearing my full name from him felt different than hearing it from the lawyers. They had used it like a label on a file. He used it like it belonged to a person. Richard's smile was gone now. Vincent, we cannot rewrite an agreement in the middle of the ceremony. Then perhaps you should not have built the ceremony on a woman you thought would be too frightened to speak. The words landed cleanly. No shouting. No spectacle. Just truth with a blade hidden under its coat. Richard went quiet. For the first time since I entered the ballroom, I saw uncertainty pass through him. The priest shifted from one foot to the other. Are we proceeding? He asked, voice thin. Vincent looked at me, not at Richard, not at the guests, not at the empire waiting to judge him. Me. You may still leave, he said. I will not stop you. I believed him. That was the worst part. If he had been cruel, I could have hated him cleanly. If he had been charming, I could have distrusted him easily. But he was offering me a door in a room where everyone else had built walls, and I did not know what to do with that kind of power. I looked at my parents. My mother had one hand pressed to her chest. My father's eyes were wet. I looked at Cassandra, furious in diamonds. I looked at Richard, whose trap had begun making a sound he did not like. Then I looked at Vincent Callahan, the man they had tried to punish with my body, my name, my fear. I am staying, I said. Not because you saved me. His gaze did not move. Then why? Because if I walk out now, they will still think they were right about me. My voice trembled, but it held. And I want to see their faces when they learn they were wrong. For the first time, the corner of Vincent's mouth changed. Not a smile. Something quieter. Approval, maybe. Or warning. Then let them learn, he said. The priest opened his book. The vows began. I repeated the words carefully, not as a girl being handed over, but as a woman signing her name to a battle she had chosen with open eyes. When Vincent took my hand, his touch was brief, warm, and respectful. He did not hold tighter than I allowed. He slid the ring onto my finger like a question, not a claim. And when the room waited for him to look ashamed, he lifted my hand slightly, turned toward them all, and said, My wife will be treated with respect in my house. Anyone who finds that difficult may leave before dinner. No one left before dinner. That was the first lesson I learned about people who survived on status. They could be insulted, corrected, exposed, and still remain seated if the food was expensive enough and the wrong departure might look like defeat. After Vincent spoke, the ballroom stayed silent for 3 full seconds, and then the room remembered how to breathe. Chairs shifted. Someone cleared a throat. A woman in pearls lifted her champagne glass with a hand that was not as steady as she wanted it to be. The string quartet began again, too softly, as if even the music understood it had permission to exist only if Vincent allowed it. I stood beside him with a ring on my finger and a dress cutting into my waist, trying to understand how my life had changed in less than an hour. I had entered that room as a debt settlement. I was leaving the aisle as Mrs. Callahan in the eyes of the law, though inside myself I was still Hannah Brooks, daughter of a tired restaurant owner, woman who knew the price of flour by the pound, woman whose feet hurt in shoes too narrow for a battle. Vincent did not keep holding my hand after the announcement. He released it gently, like respect could be measured in the space he gave back. That made the ring feel heavier, not because it trapped me, but because I could not decide yet what it meant. During the reception, I sat at the long head table beneath white flowers and watched rich people pretend nothing unusual had happened. Plates arrived with tiny portions arranged like art. Waiters poured wine I did not touch. My father sat at a table near the front with both hands folded, staring at the gold-rimmed plate as if he were afraid to damage it. My mother kept looking at me with wet eyes and a smile that broke every time she tried to hold it together. Richard sat several seats away, speaking quietly to men who leaned close and listened too carefully. Cassandra was near the windows, surrounded by women who laughed when she laughed and stopped when she stopped. I could feel her eyes on me as clearly as I could feel the tight seam of the dress against my ribs. Vincent sat to my right. He spoke little, ate less, and somehow controlled every conversation he did not join. People approached him with careful smiles, offered congratulations that sounded like negotiations, and glanced at me with curiosity sharpened by fear. Each time someone said my name wrong or skipped it entirely, Vincent corrected them. Not loudly, not tenderly. Precisely. Hannah Brooks Callahan if formality required it. Hannah if kindness allowed it. Never simply the bride. Never his wife as if I had stopped being separate from him. That should not have mattered. It did. Halfway through dinner, Cassandra finally came to the table. She carried a glass of champagne and a smile polished thin enough to cut. "Vincent," she said, "I suppose congratulations are in order." He looked at her without rising. "They are not required." Her smile tightened. "How generous of you." Then she turned to me. "Hannah, was it? The dress is quite brave." A few people nearby went still. There it was. Not open cruelty. Better dressed. The kind that could hide behind plausible innocence. My hand moved to my napkin, twisting the linen under my fingers. Vincent set down his fork. The entire table felt it. Cassandra felt it too, because her eyes flicked to him with the faintest flash of alarm. I knew he could ruin her with one sentence. Maybe less. I knew the room expected him to do it. Part of me wanted him to. The small, hurt part that had spent the day being weighed by strangers wanted to watch someone else shrink. But dignity could not be built from another woman's humiliation. I placed my palm flat on the table and spoke before Vincent could. Brave means I knew people would stare and came anyway. Cassandra blinked. I lifted my eyes to hers. The dress is just fabric. The courage is mine. The silence that followed was different from the one Vincent created. His silence made people afraid. Mine made them uncomfortable because it asked them to look at themselves. Cassandra's face changed by half an inch. Not enough to apologize. Enough to know she had been answered. She gave a small nod and walked away. My pulse thundered in my throat. I stared at my plate, terrified my hands would shake. Beside me, Vincent said nothing for a long moment. Then, very quietly, he said, "I would have handled that badly." I almost laughed from shock. "Yes," I whispered. "You would have." He looked at me then, and for the first time since the ceremony, I saw something not cold at all. Amusement, maybe. Respect, certainly. Teach me not to. I turned toward him, searching for mockery and finding none. "That is not my job." "No," he said. "It is not. But if you ever choose to correct me, I will listen." The sentence settled between us more intimately than any vow. After dinner, he led me through the estate without touching me, past portraits of stern Callahan men, past dark wood doors, past windows reflecting my white dress like a ghost walking beside a shadow. The east wing was quiet, warmer than the ballroom, with soft lamps and a bedroom larger than my entire apartment. A second door connected to a sitting room, and beyond that, another hall. "This is yours," Vincent said. "Only yours. The key is on the desk. No one enters without your permission, including me." I walked inside slowly. There were fresh towels, water on the nightstand, a robe folded near the bed, and my worn canvas overnight bag placed carefully beside a velvet chair. Its faded blue fabric looked absurd in that room. It looked like proof I was still myself. Vincent remained in the doorway. "My room is across the hall. Not connected. Security is outside the wing, not outside your door. If you want to leave tomorrow, a car will take you wherever you choose. Brooks' family kitchen is being reviewed tonight." My throat tightened. "You move fast." He did not smile. "I have spent years mistaking speed for protection. I am trying to learn the difference." I looked down at the ring on my finger, then back at him. "And what am I supposed to do now?" "Rest," he said. "Then decide what you want next." No man had ever made a command sound less like ownership. He stepped back. "Good night, Hannah Brooks." The way he said my name made the room feel less borrowed. "Good night, Vincent Callahan," I answered. When the door closed softly between us, I stood alone in silk, silence, and impossible space, realizing that the cage everyone had built for me had a key on the desk, and for the first time all day, it was in my reach. I did not sleep that first night in the East Wing. I lay on top of a bed too wide for one body, still wearing the soft robe someone had left for me, and listened to the unfamiliar house breathe around me. Old wood settled in the walls. Heat moved through hidden vents. Somewhere far away, a door closed with a quiet weight that reminded me this was not a home built for comfort. It was built for secrets. The ring on my finger caught the lamplight each time I moved my hand. A small circle of gold pretending to explain a situation no sane person could explain. Wife. The word felt like a dress that did not fit either. I turned it over in my mind until it stopped sounding romantic and started sounding legal. By 3 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and walked to the desk where the key waited exactly where Vincent said it would be. Beside it sat a leather folder. My name was printed on a cream envelope in neat black letters. Hannah Brooks. Not Callahan. Brooks. I opened it with careful fingers. Inside were copies of the conditions I had spoken in the ballroom, typed, witnessed, and signed by Vincent before dinner had even ended. Separate rooms. Independent funds. Restaurant debt under review. Right to leave without penalty. Right to keep my name. Each sentence looked impossible on paper, as if the words had been pulled out of my shaking voice and made real by ink. I should have felt safe. Instead, the numbers at the bottom caught my eye. Not the conditions. The attached debt summary. I had spent most of my adult life balancing restaurant accounts after midnight, hunting for missing cents in vendor invoices, calculating payroll with a pencil behind my ear while my father drank cold coffee beside the register. Numbers had a rhythm. When they were honest, they moved cleanly. These did not. The original loan after the kitchen fire was $180,000. High, but understandable, considering repairs, equipment, and lost revenue. The current claim balance was $964,000. My stomach tightened. Interest could be cruel, but even cruelty had math. I sat down and pulled the papers closer. There were service fees repeated under different names, assessment charges tied to dates before the contract existed, penalties applied twice in the same week, and one line marked family risk adjustment that made no legal sense at all. By dawn, I had covered 3 pages in notes using the hotel pen from the desk. My back ached. My eyes burned. The wedding dress hung across a chair like a ghost of yesterday's humiliation. When someone knocked softly at 7:30, I nearly dropped the pen. Hannah? Vincent's voice came through the door, calm and low. Are you awake? I looked at the papers spread across the desk, then at my reflection in the dark window. Messy hair, tired face, white skin pale from no sleep. A woman in a robe with a wedding ring and a battlefield made of numbers. Yes, I said. The door remained closed. May I come in? That question did more to unsteady me than if he had simply entered. One moment, I said. I gathered the papers, tied the robe tighter, then opened the door myself. Vincent stood in the hallway wearing a dark shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, no jacket, no tie. It made him look less like a portrait of power and more like a man who had also not slept. His eyes dropped briefly to the papers in my hand, then returned to my face. You found the summary. I found a lie wearing arithmetic. Something moved in his expression. Interest first, then something sharper. He stepped into the room only after I moved aside. I set the papers on the desk and pointed to the first column. This fee appears 3 times under 3 names. This penalty was added before the payment deadline. This adjustment has no basis in the original loan. And here, I tapped the last page. The final balance depends on a compounding schedule that changes halfway through the document. That is not an accident. Vincent stood beside me, close enough that I could smell coffee and clean soap, far enough that my body did not feel crowded. He read in silence. His face did not change much, but the room did. The air tightened the same way it had when Cassandra insulted my dress. Who prepared this? I asked. Richard's attorney. Of course. My laugh came out tired. Men like Richard always hire someone else to make theft look educated. Vincent looked at me then, and for the first time, surprise broke cleanly through his control. You understand financial contracts. I manage books for a restaurant that survived a fire, a pandemic, 2 rent increases, and my father's optimism. Yes, I understand financial contracts. The corner of his mouth almost moved. Then teach me what I am looking at. I stared at him. You want me to teach you? I want to know what you see that I missed. There was no pride in the sentence. No embarrassment either. Just attention. The kind that made my voice steady before I was ready for it. So I showed him. line by line, page by page. The fake fees, the hidden escalations, the wording that tied the restaurant debt to the marriage clause. The clause that said if Vincent refused the ceremony or ended the agreement within 90 days, control of a Callahan holding trust would temporarily pass to Richard as family stabilizer. I read it twice because the first time felt too absurd to be real. Then I looked up at Vincent. This was never just about humiliating you. His eyes had gone very still. No, Richard wanted you to refuse me, or marry me and resent me. Either way, he gets leverage. The silence after that felt older than the house. Vincent walked to the window and looked out over the grounds where morning light touched the hedges and stone fountains like nothing ugly had happened inside. I expected anger, a cold order, a phone call that would make men in suits appear. Instead, he placed both hands on the windowsill and bowed his head slightly. I built an empire on reading traps, he said quietly, and I did not see the one that used you as the door. The softness in his voice hurt more than fury would have. I picked up the marked papers and walked toward him. Then stop looking at me like damage and start looking at me like evidence. He turned. His blue-gray eyes met mine, and something shifted between us. Not romance. Not trust. Not yet. Something more dangerous to men like Richard. Partnership. Partnership sounded too clean for what happened next. The room became a courtroom made of coffee cups, marked pages, and the pale morning light falling across Vincent Callahan's desk. By 8:30, I had changed into the only dress from my overnight bag, a navy cotton one I usually wore to the restaurant when we had supplier meetings, and Vincent had moved us into his private study across the hall because the desk was larger and the locks were better. I did not ask what kind of locks a man like him needed. I was learning that some questions had answers I was not ready to hold. The study smelled like leather, paper, and old smoke trapped in the walls from men who had made bad decisions under expensive ceilings. Shelves rose from floor to ceiling, filled with law books, family records, and ledgers bound in dark green cloth. Vincent stood beside the window on the phone, speaking in a voice so quiet it made every word feel final. I need the holding trust bylaws, the original Brooks loan documents, and every amendment Richard's office filed in the last 18 months. No, Samuel, not later. Now. He ended the call and turned back to me. Samuel was on his way with the files. I should have been intimidated. I was a little, but mostly I was angry. Not the hot kind that makes you say foolish things. The cold kind that sharpens pencils. I sat at the desk and sorted the papers into piles. False fees. Suspicious dates. Hidden clauses. Personal pressure points. Vincent watched me label each one with sticky notes from his drawer. You work like a prosecutor, he said. I work like a woman who has had to prove rent money to landlords who already decided she was late before reading the receipt. His eyes moved over my face, then dropped respectfully back to the papers. Fair. By 10, Samuel arrived. He was a lean man in his 40s with silver at his temples, a black coat folded over one arm, and the tired eyes of someone who had seen too many family secrets and stopped being surprised by them. He looked at Vincent first, then me, then the ring on my hand. Then the files spread across the desk. Mr. Callahan, he said carefully. Mrs. Callahan. Brooks, I corrected without thinking. The room paused. Samuel inclined his head. Miss Brooks. Vincent did not correct me. That mattered more than it should have. Samuel placed a thick stack of folders on the desk. I opened the first one before either man could explain it to me. Numbers calmed me. People lied with faces, voices, silk dresses, family titles. Numbers lied only when someone forced them to, and even then they left fingerprints. For the next 3 hours, I followed those fingerprints. Vincent and Samuel gave me documents. I matched dates. I circled names. I found Richard's pattern hiding in plain sight. The restaurant debt had been inflated to make my family desperate. The marriage agreement had been drafted to make Vincent look rebellious if he refused. The trust clause had been rewritten so Richard could step in as temporary stabilizer if Vincent caused reputational damage to the family by rejecting a settlement bride. Settlement bride. I stared at those two words until the ink blurred. They had written my humiliation into legal language. I pushed back from the desk, so quickly the chair legs scraped the floor. Vincent looked up. Hannah. Do not, I said. My voice shook, but not from fear. Do not say my name like I am about to break. His jaw tightened. I was not going to. Good. Because I am not. I turned the paper toward him and tapped the phrase with my finger. This is what they called me. Not woman. Not creditor's daughter. Not person. Settlement bride. Samuel looked away. Vincent did not. His face became very still, and I recognized the kind of silence that made rooms afraid. Before he could speak, I lifted my hand. No. His eyes returned to mine. No. No disappearing into that cold place where you decide everyone deserves to be erased from your dinner table. The edge of his mouth tightened, not in amusement. In recognition. I am listening. Then hear this. If you defend my dignity by crushing someone else without letting the truth stand on its own, you will turn me into another excuse for power. I will not be that. The study went quiet. Samuel seemed to stop breathing. Outside, the grounds crew moved somewhere below the window. The faint hum of an engine drifting up through the glass like ordinary life had no idea what was happening above it. Vincent looked at me for a long moment. I expected resistance. Pride. A reminder that this was his family, his empire, his trap. Instead, he said, "What do you need?" The question emptied the anger from my lungs and left me with something shakier. Space to finish reading. Access to every contract Richard touched. And when this goes before your family, I speak. Samuel's eyebrows lifted. Vincent's gaze did not move. You speak, he said. Not beside you while you translate me into something acceptable. Not after you summarize my work. I speak first. Vincent nodded once. Agreed. The word was becoming dangerous between us. Less like obedience. More like trust. By late afternoon, I had the spine of Richard's plan mapped across 6 sheets of paper taped to the study wall. Dates, arrows, payments, signatures, contradictions. It looked messy until you stepped back. Then it looked exactly like a trap. Richard had not expected Vincent to ask me what I wanted. He had expected him to reject me and trigger the clause, or marry me in anger and ignore me long enough for the paperwork to mature. He had expected my family to be frightened, Vincent to be proud, and me to be silent. That was his mistake. Dinner was announced at 7, but none of us moved toward the dining room. Vincent sent word that the family council would meet in the library at 8. Samuel left to prepare copies. I stayed in the study, staring at the wall of evidence, suddenly aware of my tired feet, my wrinkled dress, and the ring that still felt unfamiliar against my skin. Vincent stood beside me, hands in his pockets, close enough to feel present, far enough to let me breathe. Are you afraid? He asked. Yes. Do you want me to stop it? I looked at the papers, at the word settlement bride, at the numbers that had tried to turn my father's shame into Vincent's weakness. Then I looked at the man who could command a room, but had asked instead. No, I said. I want you to let me walk in first. His blue-gray eyes held mine, and for the first time, I saw not the feared man Boston whispered about, but a man learning the cost of letting someone else be brave for him. Then I will walk behind you, he said. Not because you are weaker, because tonight, the room is yours. At 8 o'clock, the Callahan Library looked less like a room for books and more like a courtroom that had forgotten to call itself one. Dark shelves climbed the walls. Green bankers' lamps glowed along a long mahogany table. Heavy curtains covered the windows, shutting out the Boston night and trapping every old family secret inside with us. Richard sat at the head of the table, because men like him always chose the chair before anyone asked who owned it. Cassandra stood near the fireplace in a black dress, arms folded, her expression sharp with curiosity and irritation. 6 other council members filled the seats on either side, older men and women in expensive clothes, all of them wearing the same practiced calm I had seen at the wedding. The calm of people who believed emotion was for the powerless. Vincent walked behind me, just as he had promised. Not beside me, not in front of me, behind. I felt the room notice it. I felt Richard notice it most. His eyes moved from Vincent to me, and for the first time since I had met him, he looked at me without amusement. That should have satisfied me. It did not. Satisfaction was too warm for what I carried into that room. I carried paper. I carried numbers. I carried the phrase settlement bride burned into my memory like a brand I refused to wear. Samuel entered last and placed folders in front of every person at the table. No one opened them yet. They waited for Vincent. I stepped forward before he could speak. My name is Hannah Brooks, I said. My voice sounded too quiet in that large room, so I took one breath and made it steadier. Last night, this family used my father's debt, my restaurant, and my body as pieces in a transaction. Tonight, We are going to discuss the math behind that transaction. Cassandra made a soft sound, almost a laugh. Richard leaned back. Miss Brooks, this is a family council matter. I looked at him. Then you should not have dragged my family into it. The room went still. Vincent remained behind me, silent as a locked door. I opened the first folder and placed the debt summary on the table. The original loan to Brooks Family Kitchen after the fire was $180,000. The current claim balance is $964,000. Richard's mouth curved. Interest can be unforgiving. So can audits. The curve disappeared. I turned the first page toward the council. These service fees appear 3 times under 3 separate labels. Administrative charge. Processing recovery. Internal review expense. Same amount, same date, same signature trail. That is not interest. That is duplication. A woman with silver glasses near the far end picked up her folder. Her eyes narrowed. I continued before anyone could interrupt. These late penalties were applied before the payment deadline. These assessment fees refer to a property visit that never happened because the restaurant was still closed for repairs on that date. And this family risk adjustment has no definition in the original contract, no approval notation, and no legal basis that I can find. Richard's fingers tapped once on the table. You are a restaurant bookkeeper, not an attorney. No, I said. I am the person you thought would be too embarrassed to read the paperwork. Someone shifted in a chair. Samuel lowered his eyes for half a second, and I thought he might be hiding a smile. I moved to the second folder. The marriage clause ties the inflated debt to Vincent's compliance. If he refused the ceremony, delayed the agreement, or ended the marriage within 90 days, a temporary stabilizer would be appointed over the Callahan holding trust. I looked directly at Richard. That stabilizer was you. The room changed. Not loudly. Not with gasps or dramatic accusations. It changed the way a winter lake changes when the ice cracks underneath your feet. Quiet first, then everywhere. One councilman opened his folder quickly. The woman with silver glasses turned to Richard. Is this accurate? Richard stood slowly. It is an interpretation. It is a safeguard. Against what? I asked. Against Vincent refusing to humiliate himself? Against him respecting a woman you expected him to reject? Cassandra looked at Vincent then, but he was not watching her. He was watching me. Not proudly, exactly. More carefully than that. As if my courage was something fragile and dangerous, and he did not want to step too close to it. Richard's voice hardened. You have no idea what it takes to hold a family like this together. I know what it looks like when a man calls control responsibility. The words came out before fear could stop them. My hands were shaking now, but I placed them flat on the table. You did not protect this family. You built a trap out of debt, shame, and assumptions. You assumed Vincent's pride would be louder than his judgment. You assumed my parents' fear would be stronger than their love. And you assumed I would stand in a wedding dress and be grateful for whatever name you gave me. My throat tightened. I swallowed and finished. You were wrong. Silence. Deep. Complete. Then Vincent moved. One step. That was all. Richard looked past me at him, searching for the real threat, the familiar one, the man he knew how to fight. But Vincent did not take the room from me. He only said, Miss Brooks has the floor. The words settled over the table with finality. The woman with silver glasses opened the third document. Samuel, she said, can these figures be verified by an independent accountant? Already arranged, Samuel answered. The preliminary review supports Miss Brooks's findings. Richard's face went pale beneath the library lights. Cassandra had stopped pretending not to care. She stared at the papers as if they had betrayed her personally. One by one, the council members began turning pages, asking questions Richard did not answer cleanly. Dates, signatures, amendments, transfers. The empire he had tried to move behind closed doors was suddenly spread across mahogany under green glass lamps, and all I had done was make everyone red. When the vote came, it was not dramatic. It was procedural, cold, efficient. Richard was suspended from council authority pending full review. The trust clause was frozen. The Brooks debt was removed from Callahan family enforcement and sent to independent legal audit. Brooks Family Kitchen would remain open. My knees nearly gave out at that last sentence. Vincent saw it, but did not touch me. He simply moved a chair slightly closer with his foot, close enough if I wanted it, not close enough to make me use it. I stayed standing. Richard gathered his papers with hands that had finally lost their perfect stillness. As he passed me, he stopped. You think this makes you one of them? He asked quietly. I looked around the library, at the people who had watched me enter as a joke and were now avoiding my eyes. No, I said. That is what saved me. He left without another word. The door closed behind him. For several seconds, no one moved. Then Vincent stepped to my side, not in front, not behind anymore. Beside. Are you all right? He asked. I looked at the scattered papers, the frozen claws, the faces around the table, and the man who had let me speak first in a room built to silence people like me. No, I said honestly. But I am standing. His eyes softened. Then the room is still yours. The room was still mine, but I did not know what to do with a room after winning it. I stood in the Callahan Library under the green glow of bankers' lamps, surrounded by folders, council members, and the strange hollow silence that follows a truth no one can put back where it came from. Richard was gone. His chair at the head of the table sat empty, and somehow that empty chair looked louder than he had. The people who had watched me walk into the ballroom as a joke now looked at me as if they had accidentally underestimated a storm because it arrived wearing a wedding dress. My hands were cold. My feet hurt. The navy cotton dress I had changed into was wrinkled from sitting at Vincent's desk all day, and my hair had slipped loose around my face. I did not look like the wife of a powerful man. I looked like a tired restaurant bookkeeper who had read every line they hoped she would ignore. Maybe that was why they were afraid. Vincent stood beside me without claiming the victory. That was the part one would remember later. Not the frozen claws. Not Richard's face when the council suspended his authority. Not even the moment Brooks' family kitchen was set free from Callahan enforcement. I would remember Vincent Callahan, feared by half of Boston, standing next to me in a room built around his name, and refusing to take the voice I had fought to find. The woman with silver glasses closed her folder first. Miss Brooks, she said, the council owes you an apology. The old Hannah, the one who balanced invoices while apologizing for asking suppliers to correct their own mistakes, would have rushed to soften it. She would have said it was fine. She would have smiled so no one had to sit too long in discomfort. But I was learning that discomfort was sometimes the only honest thing in a room. Yes, I said. You do. Her mouth parted slightly. Then she nodded. I am sorry. One by one, the others followed. Some sounded sincere. Some sounded careful. Some sounded like people apologizing to the future consequences rather than the woman in front of them. I accepted none of it out loud. I only listened. Listening, I had discovered, could be its own kind of power. When the council finally left, the library emptied slowly. Samuel gathered the documents into a leather case and paused near the door. Miss Brooks, he said, there are very few people who can make a Callahan council read the fine print. I looked at the marked pages. There are very few people rich enough to believe they do not have to. For the first time, Samuel smiled fully. Then he left us alone. The door clicked shut, and the silence changed. It was no longer political. It was personal. Vincent walked to the head of the table where Richard had been sitting and placed one hand on the back of the empty chair. For a moment, he looked older than 35. Not weak, just tired in a way power could not hide. My father trusted him once, he said quietly. Richard, I did too, when I was young enough to mistake confidence for loyalty. I stood beside the table, unsure what to do with the sadness in his voice. I had known him for barely more than one day. I had married him under pressure, argued with him in a hallway, taught him contract math before breakfast, and now I was watching grief move behind his blue-gray eyes like weather behind glass. You missed it because he knew where to aim, I said. Vincent turned his head. At your pride. At my family's fear. At my body. At everyone's assumptions. He studied me for a long moment. And where did he aim at you? My throat tightened. I looked down at the ring on my finger. At first, I thought it was my body too. The dress. The whispers. Cassandra's smile. But that was only the door. I swallowed. He aimed at my belief that I had to be useful to deserve safety. Vincent's expression shifted. Not pity. Recognition. That is a belief this house understands too well. He reached into his pocket, and my heart stuttered before I saw what he held. Not a contract. Not a key. The ring box from the ceremony. He must have kept it after the vows, after the reception, after everything. He opened it and placed it on the table between us. My ring was already on my hand, but the empty velvet space inside made the whole marriage feel suddenly visible. Temporary. Questionable. Alive. I said vows today because the room forced a choice before you had time to breathe, he said. I honored your conditions, but I still benefited from your courage. You saved my family trust. You saved your restaurant. And you saved me from a trap I should have seen." His voice lowered. "I will not turn that into ownership." I could not move. Vincent looked at the ring on my hand, then back at my face. "If you want the marriage dissolved, I will make it clean. Quiet. No penalty. No debt. No story told at your expense. If you want time, you will have time. If you want to leave this house tonight, the car will take you anywhere. And if one day this ring means something because you choose it, not because they forced it, then I will ask again." My eyes burned. I hated crying in front of powerful men. But Vincent was not using my tears to measure his importance. He simply stood there, giving me the rarest thing any man had offered me in that house: an exit without punishment. I slid the ring from my finger and placed it in the box. His face did not change, but something in his eyes went very still. Then I closed the box and pushed it toward him. "Not no," I said. "Not yes either." His breath moved once, quiet and controlled. "What is it, then?" "Proof that I heard you." I lifted my chin, though my voice trembled. "Ask me again when this house no longer smells like an ambush. Ask me again when my restaurant is safe because the audit is finished, not because your name protects it. Ask me again when I know whether I miss you or only feel grateful to you. Ask me again when you know how to be loved without owning." The silence that followed did not frighten me. Vincent picked up the ring box with both hands, as if it deserved care. "Then I will earn the question," he said. Weeks passed before I returned to the Callahan estate. The audit cleared Brooks' family kitchen. Richard's false fees were removed. My parents kept the restaurant. Cassandra sent flowers with a note that said only, "I was cruel. I am sorry." I believed it enough to let the flowers sit by the window, not enough to answer. Vincent called sometimes, never twice if I did not pick up. He visited the restaurant once a week, sat at the corner table, paid full price, tipped the staff too much, and never asked me to sit with him unless I chose to. Slowly, the feared man became a patient one. Slowly, I stopped feeling like safety had to be earned with usefulness. On the first snowy night of December, I found him outside Brooks' family kitchen after closing, standing under the yellow sign while flakes melted on his dark coat. He held the ring box, but he did not open it. "Not yet." "Hannah Brooks," he said, "may I ask?" I looked through the window at my parents' cleaning tables, at the kitchen lights still warm, at the life that was mine before his world tried to swallow it. Then I looked at him. This time, the choice did not feel like a trap. This time, I stepped closer because I wanted to. "Ask," I said. And when he did not ask like a boss, a savior, or a man owed an answer. He asked like someone who had learned that love is not the hand that closes around you. It is the door left open while someone waits outside in the snow.